The elevator doors opened onto the 66th floor, and the scent hit you first. Cuban cigars mingling with French cologne, the warm aroma of Dover sole, prepared tableside the faint, metallic tang of money. It was July 1930, and Walter Chrysler's tower had just claimed its brief throne as the tallest structure ever built by human hands. 300 men in tailored suits stepped into a world they believed belonged only to them. The Tudor lounge stretched before them, all dark oak paneling and leaded glass, while somewhere far below, invisible and irrelevant, the streets of Manhattan writhed with a different kind of hunger. Down there on 42 N Street, the breadlines had already begun to form. By the time the Cloud Club served its first lunch, 82 breadlines snaked through New York City's avenues, serving 85,000 meals daily to men who had once worn suits, just like the ones now draped across leather chairs on the 67th floor. The stock market had collapsed 9 months earlier, October 1929, exactly 24 hours after the Chrysler Building's secret spire pierced the sky. Banks were failing at a rate of 10 per day. Factories stood silent. 1 million New Yorkers had no work, but 1,000 feet above the catastrophe, in a dining room designed to float among clouds, Edward Francis Hutton lifted a crystal glass filled with bourbon that wasn't supposed to exist. Prohibition was still the law of the land, but the Cloud Club's members each had their own locked cabinet, their own private stash, their own small fortress against inconvenient realities. Hutton's firm, Hutton and Company, had survived the crash better than most. When he spoke, people listened. Across the room, Condé Nast sat with his back to the window, unable to bear the view. His publishing empire had just imploded. 9 months ago, shares of Condé Nast Publications traded at $93. Today, they were worth $450. He owed $2 million to banks that were themselves teetering on the edge of collapse. Within 3 years, his debt would reach $5 million, his magazine seized by creditors, his legendary penthouse emptied at auction. But here in this room, surrounded by polished granite columns and etched glass appliques, he could still pretend the world made sense. This is the story of the highest lunch club in the world, a place where power brokers gathered in the sky while the nation they controlled fell apart beneath them. A fortress built on the illusion that elevation equals invincibility. It opened during the worst economic collapse in American history. It closed 49 years later, a relic of a vanished world. And in between, it revealed a truth about power that still echoes through every boardroom, every private club, every gated community. The higher you climb, the farther you are from the ground, until one day you look down and realize you've forgotten how to get back. If you've ever wondered what the ultra-wealthy discuss when the rest of us aren't listening, subscribe to see where this story goes. The Cloud Club existed because Texaco wanted a restaurant. That's how these things always begin, not with grand visions, but with practical demands. The Texas company, soon to rebrand as Texaco, had agreed to lease 14 floors in Walter Chrysler's new tower, but only if management provided a proper venue for executive lunches. Oil barons from Houston did not eat at automats or diners. They required privacy, prestige, and a place to conduct business away from prying eyes and inconvenient regulations. Walter Chrysler understood. The automobile magnate had financed the entire building from his personal fortune, $14 million in construction costs, because he wanted something permanent. Factories rust, cars become obsolete, but a proper tower built of steel and clad in stainless Nerosta that would never tarnish, could outlive him. Could outlive everyone. So he gave Texaco what they wanted and more. He hired his architect, William Van Allen, the man who had secretly assembled the 185-foot spire that made the building the world's tallest, to design a club that would be part medieval castle, part futuristic fantasy. Van Allen, ever the showman, delivered an architectural contradiction. The 66th floor featured a Tudor-style lounge with oak paneling and wrought-iron chandeliers, as if Henry VII I might stride through the leaded glass doors at any moment. The grill room had pegged plank floors and heavy wooden beams, an old English hunting lodge transplanted into the clouds. Then you climbed the Renaissance-style marble and bronze staircase to the 67th floor, and you entered the future. The main dining room seated roughly 80 men at small tables arranged beneath a vaulted ceiling painted with clouds. Polished granite columns rose like monuments to modernity. Etched glass sconces cast geometric shadows across walls adorned with a massive mural showing Manhattan as seen from above, as if the diners were gods surveying their domain. Because that's what they were or believed themselves to be. Membership was capped at 300. You could not apply. You had to be elected, and if accepted, you paid an initial fee of $200, equivalent to roughly $4,000 today, plus annual dues, ranging from $150 to $300. By 1971, 180 corporations supplied the club's membership, each nominating executives who met the unspoken requirements: male, wealthy, powerful, and willing to embrace the fiction that the world beyond those triangular windows did not truly matter. The club operated only during daylight hours. This was not a place for evening entertainment or drunken revelry. Men arrived for lunch, conducted business over Dover sole and black bean soup, monitored stock prices in the ticker room, perhaps enjoyed a shave at the barber shop or selected a cigar from the humidor, then returned to their offices. Deals were made. Fortunes shifted. The machinery of American capitalism hummed along, lubricated by bread and butter pudding and served on bone china. The food itself became legendary. The kitchen sourced number 18 pink grapefruits, larger and sweeter than anything available in supermarkets, grown on a farm in upstate New York owned by a club member. Melons arrived from the same estate. Everything was perfect, curated, controlled. Texaco executives dominated the early membership. They had their own private dining room decorated with murals showing oil refineries and company trucks, a temple to petroleum rendered in exquisite detail across 2 walls. One panel depicted a quaint New England town with a Texaco station at its heart, as if to say, we are everywhere, we are essential, we are permanent. Walter Chrysler maintained his own private sanctuary on the same floor. Black etched paneling, a frosted blue glass frieze depicting automobile workers, faceless men building machines they could never afford. Windows slanting with the building's crown, offering views of Central Park that stretched to the horizon. It was the highest private dining room in Manhattan. Chrysler could, as one observer noted, look down on Henry Ford and everyone else. And that was the point. The Cloud Club was never just about food or convenience. It was about altitude as metaphor, about creating physical distance from the struggles of ordinary life, about constructing a space where the depression might as well be happening on another planet. Because it was, in a sense, while breadlines formed on the streets below, while families huddled in Hooverville shantytowns in Central Park, while children went to bed hungry and men jumped from office windows, the Cloud Club served lunch in the literal and figurative sky. The disconnect was not accidental. It was structural. It was the entire purpose. Edward Hutton's brokerage survived because wealthy clients still needed someone to manage what remained of their fortunes. Gene Tunney, the heavyweight boxing champion who had defeated Jack Dempsey in 1927's infamous long count fight, had retired the following year and immediately transformed himself into a business executive, joining boards, making investments, dining at the Cloud Club. Juan Tripper, founder of Pan American Airways, conducted negotiations that would shape global aviation while gazing down at a city that could barely afford bus fare. They were not monsters. That's important to understand. They were not cartoon villains twirling mustaches while the nation suffered. They were men who genuinely believed that their success was earned, that the system rewarded merit, that their elevation proved their worth. The Cloud Club reinforced that belief with every meal, every handshake, every private conversation in a room, designed to make them feel untouchable. And for a while it worked. But even gods grow nervous when the sky begins to fall. The first cracks appeared not in the building's foundation, but in the membership roster. By 1932, 3 years after the crash, the men dining on the 67th floor had begun to notice that some chairs remained empty. Friends disappeared, their fortunes evaporated, their names quietly removed from the club's rolls. Condé Nast still appeared, though everyone knew he was drowning in debt, his empire controlled by bankers, his magazines hemorrhaging money despite his desperate innovations. In 1932, Vogue featured its first full-color photograph on the cover, a woman holding a beach ball shot by Edward Steichen. It was revolutionary. It was also an act of defiance, Nast pouring resources he no longer possessed into magazines that fewer and fewer people could afford to buy. Vanity Fair would cease publication in 1936. Nast would spend his final years struggling to regain what the Depression had taken, never quite succeeding, dying in 1942 with $5 million in debt still hanging over his name. But in the Cloud Club, you could not show weakness. That was the unspoken rule. You appeared, you ordered, you discussed business as if nothing had changed. To admit vulnerability was to risk expulsion not by formal vote but by social exclusion, the slow fade into irrelevance that awaited anyone who couldn't maintain the illusion. The club's Prohibition-era operations required careful management. Each member had a private locker where liquor was stored, technically their own property, served by waiters who understood that discretion was paramount. The arrangement was blatantly illegal and universally tolerated. Police did not raid clubs at the top of the Chrysler Building. Power-insulated power altitude provided immunity, and the law-like poverty was something that happened to other people. Yet outside the windows visible, if anyone had bothered to look, the consequences of their decisions accumulated like storm clouds. By 1933, 13 million Americans were unemployed, 1/4 of the nation's workforce. In New York alone, over 50,000 people had no homes. Families moved in with relatives until those relatives could no longer support them, and then everyone ended up on the street or in the breadlines or in the makeshift shanties that dotted the parks. The Cloud Club's members had not caused the Depression. That's what they told themselves, and it was partially true. The crash resulted from systemic failures, speculative bubbles, inadequate regulations, and a financial architecture designed to prioritize short-term gains over long-term stability. But the men eating lunch 1,000 feet above the disaster were the architects of that system. They had lobbied for those inadequate regulations. They had inflated those bubbles. They had pocketed the gains, and when the bill came due, retreated to their fortress in the sky. The cognitive dissonance required to maintain this lifestyle was extraordinary. To sit in a room painted with clouds, while below in the actual clouds in the rain and snow and summer heat people stood in line for soup. To discuss stock prices while families lost their homes. To order Dover sole while children scavenged for food. Some members justified it as necessity. Business required networking, and networking required spaces like the Cloud Club. Others invoked meritocracy. They had earned their place through hard work and talent, and the fact that others had not was simply the natural order. A few perhaps felt guilt, though they rarely expressed it and never let it interfere with their lunch orders. The club developed its own mythology. Stories circulated about deals made at specific tables, fortunes saved or lost between the bread and butter pudding and the coffee service. The grandest men's room in New York, someone called it, referring to Texaco's private sanctuary. The phrase was meant as admiration, but revealed something darker. Even their bathrooms were monuments to excess, to the belief that they deserved luxuries others could never imagine. And still the breadlines grew longer. The Cloud Club did not collapse. It eroded. The erosion began slowly and visibly, like rust on unseen steel. In the 1950s and 1960s, newer clubs opened in newer buildings. The Rainbow Room at Rockefeller Center offered similar prestige with better views and evening hours. The Sky Club, the Pinnacle Club, others whose names have since been forgotten, all competed for the same finite pool of executives willing to pay for altitude and exclusivity. Attendance at the Cloud Club declined. By 1971, the membership still numbered 300, but those 300 were supplied by 180 corporations rather than individuals, a subtle shift that revealed the truth. The club had become a corporate perk, a line item in budgets, no longer the personal passion of powerful men, but an expense to be justified to shareholders. Texaco, the club's original patron and largest tenant, began considering a move. Manhattan real estate had become expensive, and the suburbs offered cheaper alternatives. In 1977, Texaco relocated hundreds of employees to Westchester County, vacating hundreds of thousands of square feet in the Chrysler Building. The Cloud Club lost its anchor. 2 years later, in 1979, the club closed forever. No ceremony marked the occasion. No speeches celebrated 49 years of operation. The doors simply locked, the furniture was removed, and the space sat empty, waiting for a future that would never arrive. Various developers proposed transformations over the following decades. Turn it into a disco, someone suggested in the 1980s, as if the ghost of Walter Chrysler wouldn't have risen from his grave to strangle them. Make it a gastronomic club, said another. A public restaurant. A private event space. None of these plans materialized. The cost of renovation exceeded the potential return, and besides, the layout was impractical, the ceilings too high, the windows oddly shaped, the whole space designed for a purpose that no longer existed. The Cloud Club became a ruin not through destruction, but through abandonment. Dust settled on the Tudor paneling. The murals faded. The stock ticker room, once the nervous system of American capital, fell silent. 40 years passed. Squatters of a different sort moved in, merchant banks and shipping firms, tenants who cared nothing for the history embedded in those walls, who saw only square footage and lease terms. Condé Nast had died in 1942, his empire restored, but his personal fortune never fully recovered. Edward Hutton lived until 1962, his firm thriving, though in 1985 it would be convicted of check kiting in one of the era's largest financial scandals, proof that altitude provides no permanent immunity from consequences. Tunney passed in 1978, 1 year before the club closed, spared the sight of watching his sanctuary become a ruin. Walter Chrysler himself had died in 1940, long before the club's decline, still believing his tower would outlast empires. He was both right and wrong. The building remains a landmark, an icon of Art Deco architecture that tourists photograph and architectural students study. But the world it represented, the café society of plutocrats dining in clouds, dissolved like smoke. The final irony: in 2019, developers announced plans to resurrect the Cloud Club, to recreate its glamour on lower floors, with prominent interior designer Ken Falk overseeing the project. The renderings showed sumptuous spaces, period-appropriate furniture views of a Manhattan skyline now crowded with taller towers. The project stalled, delayed, quietly shelved. Even nostalgia, it seemed, could not justify the expense. On a clear day, if you stand at the corner of Lexington and 42, and you can still see the Chrysler Building's crown, the sunburst arches, the triangular windows, the stainless steel that never tarnished, just as promised. It remains even now the most beautiful skyscraper in New York, more beloved than the taller Empire State, more admired than the glass towers that dwarf it. But beauty is not the same as relevance, and height is not the same as permanence. The Cloud Club's legacy is not its Dover soul or its Art Deco splendor or the deals made between courses. Its legacy is what it reveals about power's greatest vulnerability: isolation. The fortress paradox, as historians might call it, the belief that elevation provides protection, that distance creates security, that if you climb high enough, the problems below will cease to affect you. It's a seductive fiction. It's also a lethal one. Every age produces its Cloud Clubs, spaces where the powerful gather to convince themselves that their separation from ordinary struggle is natural, earned, permanent. The names change. The architecture evolves. Private jets replace Tudor lounges. Davos replaces the 67th floor. But the fundamental error remains the assumption that you can build a fortress in the sky and never have to come down. The men who lunched at the Cloud Club were not uniquely cruel or unusually blind. They were products of their time, beneficiaries of a system that rewarded their particular talents and circumstances, convinced that their success proved the system's justice. When that system collapsed in 1929, they retreated to altitude, both physical and metaphorical, and told themselves the view was better from up there. They were right about one thing: the view was better. You could see for miles. You could watch Manhattan spread below you like a map, the rivers gleaming, the parks laid out in geometric perfection, the whole city reduced to an abstraction beautiful and controllable and safely distant. What you couldn't see were the faces, the men standing in breadlines, the families evicted from homes, the children who went hungry while the Cloud Club served pink grapefruits from private farms. Distance erases detail, and detail is where humanity lives. The club closed in 1979, but the impulse that created it never died. It merely relocated, evolved, found new expressions in gated communities and exclusive conferences and algorithms that ensure the wealthy never have to encounter inconvenient realities. The tower still stands, but the world that believed altitude equaled immunity has crumbled. And perhaps that's the real lesson. Not that the Cloud Club was evil, but that it was fragile. Power built on exclusion, on distance, on the illusion that you can rise above the consequences of your own decisions, is power built on sand. Or, in this case, on clouds. Clouds dissipate. They always do. And when they do, you discover that the ground was always there waiting, patient, inevitable. The only question is whether you remember how to reach it or whether you've forgotten how to walk at altitudes where the air is thick enough for everyone to breathe.